You're welcome to this discussion with Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, a political scientist who has been in the civil society space for a long time. As you do know, for those who know him, he comes from Kano, and Kano State is predominantly uh, a Muslim community, but he has thrived. And we want to talk to him today about the things happening in Nigeria today and compare them with the past and to see where perhaps we ought to have done some things differently. Professor Jibo Ibrahim, you are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Rima.
Yeah, the first question I'll ask is that we are having a debate today, a controversy over Nigeria's electoral system, whether we should have some mechanisms to make it more transparent for people to believe the results. You would have seen that the controversy emerged from the Senate, where the minority parties whose membership has dwindled very drastically complaining that there have been some changes which they do not agree with. What is your take about the use of electronics in the electoral system? Do you think that it will actually improve Nigeria's electoral system?
I think so very much. Let me make the point that after the 2003 and 2007 elections, Nigerians were in shock when they discovered their votes simply did not count. The votes will count at the polling unit where people vote, and it's counted in public. Once it goes to the collation centers, the numbers get changed. That was the problem posed by both the 2003-2007 election. So since then, there have been a lot of reform aimed at correcting that anomaly and introducing transparency and accountability, not just in the voting process, but also in the collation process. The object of controversy today is that it was finally, after extensive consultations with political parties, civil society, and all that, the proposal that came out was that votes should be electronically transferred directly from the polling units, where we know in general votes are counted correctly, to a central station. And that central station should be something that all Nigerians can see from everywhere in the country. That transparency will make it very difficult to change the results after they have been declared. It was therefore a very important process. It was tried with difficulties in the past. First of all, there was a glitch in terms of the presidential election. And secondly, it was caught up in a court case where the Supreme Court decided that, well, it wasn't really in the laws of the land. And therefore, it was decided it was important that that provision be in the Electoral Act. And that was what Senate had just removed. I'm extremely disturbed about what in Senate because from the allegations from opposition members, Senate voted to have that reform in the Electoral Act, that was the decision of the Senate. When it came out, however, that section had been removed. So this is the second time this is happening in our legislative history, when a bill will come out from the National Assembly and subsequently at the leadership level, the bill will be changed. If that is true, that's a criminal act. It is an anti-democratic act. And I think Nigerians should stand up against it because that makes nonsense of our laws when legislators will decide on the text of a law and somebody will subsequently change the decisions of the National Assembly and put whatever they want. I'm extremely disturbed about it, and I feel it's very dangerous for our democracy.
Now, let us interrogate the merit of the decision. Countries such as Netherlands, Germany, Norway have actually moved away from electronic voting because they believe that it is easier to manipulate those things. Don't you think that the problem that we have is that the people of Nigeria by themselves are not willing to do something about the changes? We are trying to make laws to make up for our lack of morality, our inability to do things right.
Actually, The fact of the matter is that Nigeria does not have a system of electronic voting. And what we are talking about is not electronic voting. Nigeria has a system of manual voting using ballot paper. And at the end of the vote, the ballot papers are counted in public in front of the voters. They are added, and the results are then written down and transferred electronically to a central station. So we are not talking about electronic voting. We are talking of electronic transfer of results that have been computed and counted in public from a process of manual voting on ballot paper, where the ballot papers are there for verification of results.
Okay, granted, let's accept that argument. But fact also is that it is possible, like it happened before, that if you check the IREV in the last election, some people just uploaded nothing, things that were not legible. They uploaded papers, some photographs, and so forth. That means that the problem is actually not just the fact that they are not transmitted, but that you have agents or political parties that are not serious, they are not manning the polling units the way they should be manned.
Clearly, when it was first tried, there were some teething problems. I think the most serious problem was insufficient training of the polling workers. Some had not done their complete training and did not know how to photograph the results and how to transmit it. So that was the problem. That problem can easily be corrected by proper training of the polling workers. And I think there is a general argument about some of the difficulties of organizing elections, where sometimes polling workers will be recruited, well trained, and the day before the election, some powerful people will change the list of the polling workers and bring in people who have not been properly accredited and trained. That behavior needs to change if we are to protect the integrity of our elections.
Okay, now let's move on. We've been doing these electoral changes. We've had almost every assembly tenure, we've had amendments to the electoral system. And with all the amendments, our faith in the electoral system seems to be worsening. We seem to have less trust in the electoral system now than before. What is it that we're doing wrong that is creating this problem?
What we are doing wrong is very simple and straightforward. The quality of the political class in this country has been going down rapidly. We used to have a situation where people of character and integrity emerge as candidates for political parties and contest elections. Over time, corruption in the electoral system and in the wider political system has created a situation in which more and more crooks and criminals, and I mean that literally, are finding themselves into political office. And as that happens, the quality of the electoral process becomes polluted, and there is a decline in the quality of elections. I think this is a huge problem that Nigerians have to organize themselves to address. And it is possible to address it. In every constituency, people know respectable people in their community. They know the crooks in their community. What ordinary Nigerians need to do is to make sure they are active in their political party branches, that they participate in party conventions and primaries, and they ensure that people of integrity are elected as candidates and subsequently as elected representatives. That is the approach to improve the general integrity of our electoral process and thereby improve the quality of our democracy in this country.
Well, let me go a little bit personal. You must be feeling disappointed at this age that having traveled to different parts of the country, taught students at the university, hoped to improve the country, and things don't appear to be going the way you had hoped.
Exactly. The first generation of students were people with ideas, people with ideology, people with a vision. Part of the reasons I left the university early was that even the quality of students started going down. The issue of exam malpractices became an issue, and it was extremely disappointing to see the objective of having good Nigerian citizens started confronting significant challenges along the way. I think the problem of corruption in this country is not just a government issue, it's also a societal issue. And at all levels of society, people try to cut corners, to cheat, and to avoid doing things correctly. This means our socialization process in the country have been significantly affected. And there is a need for all of us as citizens of Nigeria who have good character, and I think Nigerians with good character are still the majority in the country, to rise up and make sure positions of power that are very critical in determining outcomes for society are not occupied by the crooks and criminals within the society, but by the best members of society. It's not daydreaming. It's something that could happen if Nigerians begin to mobilize effectively at the local level.
Are you surprised that this also, the complaints that we have also happen in religious cycles? Let's talk about the Christian faith to which you belong. That also people who come through the church, people who you expect that don't descend to some levels, when they get into public office, there's hardly a difference between them and those who don't go to church at all.
Well, that's the point I'm making, that corruption in Nigeria is not just at the level of government, it is also at the level of society. First of all, I think I've been making the point for a very long time that for the past 30, 40 years, Nigerians, crooks in Nigeria, have discovered that religion is itself a pathway to accumulation of wealth. And many of them have entered the religious arena actively proselytizing, not with the objective of creating pathways to heaven, but with the objective of enriching themselves. And that's why many people who appear to be religious in this country engage in acts that contradict all the tenets of their religion. That's why I'm extremely concerned about Nigerian society. I feel there's a sense in which we shouldn't despair. I don't believe the majority of Nigerians are crooks. They are not. But the most active Nigerians, those who engage in decision making, those who enter into public arena, tend to be the crooks and therefore push societal outcomes towards their objectives, because the other Nigerians of good character are not blocking them, are not taking actively decisions to engage public space and to engage the political process. That is the objective we must all work towards. How do we get the good Nigerians to come to transmit their good behavior into the public arena?
Now, let's take a look back to your past as we are growing up in Kano. Did you have a sense when you were going with the little ones and other people to church to worship that could be at this stage the way we are now when you were younger in those days?
Well, I grew up in a very ascetic church. In fact, the pastors in my church were very much of the view that wealth may be a blockage in getting to heaven. And they felt that the majority of the members of the church who are actually poor should comfort themselves that things of this world may not divert them into hell, and that what is important for them is to accept their situation in life, stay closely to the teachings of the Gospels, and enjoy in the life hereafter. One of my biggest shocks when growing up later in life in the 1970s and 1980s was to see the emergence of Pentecostal churches where wealth was glorified and poverty was considered a curse from God. It's totally different from the gospel I was brought up in. I personally think is a deep corruption of the Christian faith, but that's just a personal view. And that worshiping wealth has become a real problem within Nigerian Christianity, and that attitude needs to change if we are to stay on the strict and narrow path to salvation. I'm not a trained religious person, but that's the lesson I bring from my childhood. We cannot live in a society where the main objective in life is to acquire wealth through any means possible, legitimate or illegitimate.
Well, it's still on the past. Let me ask you, the memories. What memories do you have from the past that you still remember and you are happy with? What are the things that you remember about your past when you were growing up that you look at them with some kind of nostalgia?
Well, I recall when I was admitted to secondary school in 1968, my parents simply gave me money for bus, and I put my box on my head, walked to the motor park, took a bus to Zaria, and when I got to Zaria, I asked for my way to the school, and that's how I went to secondary school. And that's how all of us at that time went to secondary school. That Nigeria was safe. A kid of 12, 13 years could travel without any concern about their personal security. That was 1968 when there was a civil war raging up in parts of the country. And still, most of the country was very safe and people could move. You didn't have crooks on the way trying to capture young kids to cut up their bodies and sell for spare parts, as they call it, a very terrible word that Nigerians invented, because you can't have body parts of a human being considered as spare parts and sold for money. It's a level of primitive behavior that was totally unimaginable. Today, traveling by road is something of serious concern to all of us in this country. Would we be picked up by kidnappers? Will we be shot by bandits on the road? How safe are we? That's one issue from my memory that comes back to me again and again. What have we done to our society where there is a total breakdown of ethics, of behavior, and where people are ready to engage in bestial acts just to make money? How come money has become the god in our society?